Right. For the next 20 to 25 minutes, we'll switch to English because I now, with great honor and pleasure, can welcome our next guest on the stage, Dr. Helen Yields, Head of Innovation Analysis and Public Affairs at Royal Academy of Engineering, UK. A person with a great insight into the British technology strategy, and maybe will be able to inspire Danish politicians, Danish companies, Danish academia in adopting our own national ditto. We've arranged it so that Dr. Yields will be speaking for about 10 minutes.
10 minutes.
So then there'll be 10 minutes of questions. You're very welcome to ask questions. So just raise your hand, and I'll see you down there, and we'll take it from there. Dr. Yields, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. It is a pleasure to be here. As said, I work at the Royal Academy of Engineering, so that's the UK's National Academy for Engineering and Technology, your sister academy in the UK, where I oversee our research and innovation portfolio, analysis and public affairs. I should also say I spent some time on secondment into our government in the civil service in January to June 2022, which is where a lot of the work from the technology strategy was developed. I didn't do it. I was in the room doing bits of it, but I can't claim full credit. So, I've been asked to talk about the UK's technology strategy and the Academy's interactions with it. And it's this document here, our Science and Technology Framework, which was published in March 2023, which is the UK's backbone behind their technology strategy. This framework sets out 10 priorities or key actions. When they were being developed, it was known as the 10 big things, but big things doesn't really work for a policy document, so it's flips between priorities and actions at the moment. And it's quite a comprehensive framework trying to cover the whole of the system that would impact technology strategies. So we've got critical technologies, signalling UK's strengths and ambitions, investment in R&D, talent and skills, financing innovative science and tech companies, procurement, international, digital and physical infrastructure, regulation and standards, and an innovative public sector. Depending on how time goes, I will talk you through a few of these in a little bit more detail, but before getting to that, I wanted to just back up and do a brief history of the UK's technology strategies. So, this slide sets out about the last 10 years of the UK's approaches to technology strategies. If I hadn't submitted these slides earlier on in the week, I might have put a question mark at the end now, given the news that came out of the UK yesterday. Let's not talk about that too much. So as you can see, it's been quite a busy, we have quite a flurry of strategies, and I would say that there is an element of instability that's characterised the last 10 years, but nevertheless ambition to have strategies. 2013 was when the 8 great technologies first got picked. They had a reasonable staying power. 2016 to 2019, we had an industrial strategy which took a more kind of comprehensive view beyond just tech, thinking about procurement, talent and skills. That lasted 3 years, possibly quite good going for us at the time. Then, as we move over to this hand, to the right-hand side of the screen, we're getting into the components that have landed us where we are now. And what's particularly interesting here, I think, is the integrated review, which sounds very dry, but the integrated review was a document that combined security, defence, development and foreign policy. And this document recognised the importance of securing strategic advantage through science and technology to ensure the UK's successful research base translates into influence over critical and emerging technologies that are going to be really important in geopolitical competition, as well as our future prosperity. So it's this real sort of security lens brought onto things. That also coincided with the 17 sensitive areas of the economy, which relates to some legislation around National Security Investment Act and requires some companies to report, if they're operating in these areas, to report if there's possibility of acquisition or investment from foreign entities. And then that takes us to the Science and Technology Framework, which builds on the integrated review. Yes, it's a document with 10 actions and lists in it, but it's also been supported by some real structural changes which have tried to embed science and technology at the highest table in government and across the whole of government. I'm not sure if it's the same here, but we complain a lot about the lack of join-up across government departments and siloed approaches. So we got a new government department, the Department for Science and Innovation and Technology, in March last year. We've always had science and innovation technology in government departments, but never has it been standalone. So we now have a department that is focused on this and not also having to deal with gas and energy prices, and a department that's able to focus on this and has now got digital in it, because previously we had digital sat with culture and sport. So it's a department... It's a department that can really focus on this, and it also means that we have a Secretary of State who is completely focused on this, and they are sat at the cabinet table, which is where the biggest decisions get made. So there is somebody there whose remit is thinking about science and technology in these whole government discussions and decisions. Another thing that got created alongside this was the National Technology Advisor. So in the UK, we've got a really good track record of having chief scientific advisors in each of our government departments. And the Royal Academy of Engineering, we've been saying, but where are the engineers? Where are our chief engineering officers? And we're going to claim, we claim the National Technology Advisor as one of our own. So he's been in post for about 6 months, and his job is to come and work alongside the department, but say things like innovation, products, customers, commercialisation. Discussions around science, innovation, technology in the UK can often be quite weighted towards the universities and the science. So we think the National Technology Advisor is a really good move, and also somebody that can think about it across the piece, convergence. What does it mean to work on all these different sectors together? We also had a National Science and Technology Committee. Again, this was a cabinet-level committee meant to be chaired for a short period by the Chancellor. It has now been slightly changed. But again, it's this acknowledgement that other government departments have to come to the table to discuss science and technology because it impacts their activities as well. And the final point I wanted to mention on this other additional things to the framework itself is this expert exchange. So in the UK, we have a civil service and, in fact, a parliament that is populated by great people, but not many of them are scientists or engineers by background at all. And there was an acknowledgement that if the government wants to do good work on science, innovation, technology, it needs to be able to tap into the right kind of expertise. And this new government department has set up an expert exchange programme trying to really increase permeability and get experts in. We at the Academy have helped with that. We have advertised the opportunities, and some of our people, some of the brilliant researchers we fund sort of got fast-tracked in. And there's 100, they've now, in the year that they've been in, this government department's been in place, there's been 100 scientists and engineers moved into that department on secondments, which of a government department of 2,000 people seems pretty good and was quite fast for us. So I will now move on to talk about probably not as many arrows as I've put on here, but I particularly want to touch on some of the specifics of these 10 big things. And I think the one that is most interesting and relevant, and I have today learned that picking winners is a phrase that translates, is around our first one, which is about critical technologies. And this, I guess, is our nearest approach to picking winners. These 5 critical technologies have been selected, and the idea is that the other 9 priorities in the framework will be directed, in part, to help ensure that these particular technologies can flourish. The icons on your right represent the criteria that was used to select these. Now, this selection process has not been made public, and I think it's interesting here that you can see the national security and defence and the threats and resilience, which plays to my earlier point that the security element has become increasingly important. I think there's an interesting debate to be had, and is being had by some people. What's a tech? What's a sector? What does it mean? And should that be different or the same? So for each of these 5 critical technologies, and I think this is where the most action has been had on the framework, Pretty much everyone has now got a national strategy that has been published. It has got some commitment to investment over a decade, and it has got some sort of expert group around it. There is definitely still more work to be done, and you can see that in some of these strategies that have been published then commission further work that's needed. This hasn't been without its criticism. Certainly our semiconductors strategy was felt to be delayed, overdue, and it has committed 1 billion in the next decade, and I certainly heard the CHIPS Act mentioned earlier, so that level of investment just is quite low when you think about what else is going on. A quick word on kind of the Academy's involvement with activities like this. So this slide demonstrates a few different ways that we have interacted with government technology strategy development, and can bucket it in sort of 3 ways. One would be proactive, reactive, and commissioned. So from a proactive perspective, I've put up here a cover from some work we did on engineering biology. So back in 2009, the Academy, with some of our sister academies, did a big piece of work around engineering biology, synthetic biology. And we refreshed that in 2019 because there was perhaps a feeling that it wasn't as high up the agenda as we might have liked in the UK. So that's an example of us being quite proactive, doing some work, letting government know about it. On the reactive front, the example I put here is critical conversations. So we wanted to support government's effort in these technology selection, but also note that there's still debate to be had. And we had over the last year a series of online public debates, a critical conversation indeed, on each of these technologies, where we were able to bring in experts, critique the strategies, think about what else might or might not be needed. And then on the Commission side, when the quantum strategy got published, in it announced that the Academy would be doing a review of the UK quantum sector's infrastructure needs over the next 10 years. So we also get asked to do work on these type of activities as well. I'm going to pause there because it has been 10 minutes.
Yeah, perfect. Time's up. Thank you very much, Dr. Yield. Once again, I'll remind you, if you have a question for Dr. Yield, please raise your hand, and there'll be a microphone in the room. So please, yes, let's just start in the room. It's fine.
Yeah, my name is Hans Juler from Copenhagen Atomics, and you talked about the mess with the politicians in the UK. We have the same here, and they don't understand what we are talking about, and that's not my postulate. They have said that themselves. So we have to try to educate them, and that's difficult. But my question is, in fact, I can see your priorities here, but what about energy technology, energy security?
Great point. So I've got 2 elements to my answer to that. One, I have presented these 5 critical technologies. This current government also has some key growth sectors, which does include green industries and I think life sciences, and I can't remember the others off the top of my head. That, I think, is part of the debate that's happening at the moment about technologies or sectors, and I think that debate is partly because these technologies are getting more airtime, more coverage, possibly more action. Then the second part to that answer would be, when this government department got created and we call them MOGs, Machinery of Government Changes, the details of which are boring, but one of them is that we now have a department that we call DESNES, which is the Department for Energy Security and Net Zero. So we have got a whole government department that is looking towards those things. I think it is a fair point that there does need to be good cross-working across those science, innovation, technology, and energy security and green industry development, and possibly there could be scope for more work there.
Thank you. Any more questions? Yes?
Henrik Wigner, University of Copenhagen. Curious about the National Technology Advisor. What's the political point of reference, and also what's the association between the Chief Science Advisor and the National Technology Advisor?
I will take the second part of that first. So the National Technology Advisor post, I think, was probably created maybe a year and a bit ago. And at that time, our government chief scientific advisor was a man called Sir Patrick Vallance, who is has a background in life sciences, both in academia and in industry in GSK. So I think Patrick probably had something to do with the creation of the role, and then he was able to take both roles. So he was both Government Chief Scientific Advisor and National Technology Advisor, because he's a very impressive individual and he has got that industry and academia spread. When Patrick stepped down, they decided to split the role, and our Government Chief Scientific Advisor is a quite brilliant mathematician but doesn't have the industry experience. They work very closely together, and I think that, well, they do work very closely together. Possibly the Government Chief Scientific Advisor is his boss, is the National Technology Advisor's boss. On a political front, these are not political roles, these are civil servant roles. So they are protected from the politics, that's probably not true, but they are not political, they're not political roles.
Thank you. Any more from the floor? Yes, up here.
Juan from DTI, thanks for a fantastic overview. 10 minutes, incredible. Could you comment on resilience and security, which takes a lot of our focus, and the trend that seems to be in Europe about prioritizing also research and technology focus according to burning issues? That's one. And then no food and no water and environmentals, you know.
So to take your second one first, I can't remember what the 5 growth sectors are, but I don't think that water or food is in them. What I will say is I saw our National Technology Advisor give a talk earlier this week, so I shall just crib something he points out, and I've seen him point it out twice now. He has flagged about food, how much of our economy and how important food is, yet it has never had a particular fund for it or an innovation program associated with it. So I'm not suggesting there's any action there, but it's a discrepancy that he's obviously clocked. And your first question was about security and resilience. Yeah, this concept that was introduced in the integrated review was around strategic advantage through science and technology. It wasn't particularly defined. We've had some conversations in the academy about what that might mean. And there was a proposal in there to come up with a framework called Own Access Collaborate, or Own Collaborate Access, OCA. That idea of, can we work out what are the things that we need to really own or have capability end-to-end in the UK for? What do we need to collaborate on with partners, and what do we need to access? I'm not sure how far that framework has been developed into a standalone thing, but I think it is informing some of the things we're seeing in our in the strategies for each of the 5 critical technologies. I would also hazard that it is part of the reason why future telecommunications and semiconductors are on there.
Thank you. Carsten?
First of all, thank you very much for a very inspiring and motivating presentation, and congratulations to Great Britain. We tend to believe that everything is a mess related to Brexit, so this is really good news. Thanks a lot. My question here, 1 year into the strategy, if you asked government, universities, industry, what is the most important thing created by this strategy, the most valuable gain from the strategy?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, if you're feeling very enthusiastic, the government did publish a year on a massive document listing every single thing they'd done, which was excessive. That's a really good question. So I think for industry, there is, if I can go back. So I think for industry, the back businesses to take innovations from labs into our lives. That's finance innovative science and tech businesses. We've got a pretty good investment landscape in the UK. we're nowhere near like the US, but in terms of Europe comparisons, we're quite good on VC. What we're not good at is using pension funds to fund, to invest in science and tech firms. And there has been some commitments around that. I don't think that we've seen action that yet coming from that, but there's been some commitments that some pension companies have made to put some of their funds into relevant unlisted assets. I think that could potentially be one thing that industry might identify. Universities, I think it would be some of the activities that are around investing in R&D to grow our economy and create jobs. So I will flick forward and back. So this is an example of some of the things here. I think they're really pleased to be in Horizon Europe, for sure. I'm not sure that that's credited to this science and tech framework, but I think that if you were to ask them what's the thing that's happened in the last year that you're really pleased about to universities, that's going to be on the list. The other things that are also happening in this space are is a bit of diversifying what we're doing with our funding. So we now have an advanced research and invention agency called ARIA, and this had its own special piece of legislation to let it do more high-risk, high-reward research without having to have the same kind of reporting requirements that we put on our other main funders. And similarly, Research Ventures Catalyst is another initiative to try and do some more interesting entrepreneurial type funding. So I would think that universities would say Horizon Europe and then list a couple of other funding opportunities. Government, as I said, they've issued a huge document to tell you what they think is great. What I think maybe is the secret, the slow burn thing that has happened is around procurement. So we are not very good in the UK at procuring innovation, working with SMEs to get those sorts of products and services into our into use. And this has been a wicked problem for a long, long time. I think a lot of it comes down to culture. There has now been a change in our procurement legislation, so it is now enabled that there shouldn't be so many rules that are stopping people from doing things. So the National Technology Advisor and others are working with some government departments to show how you can do things that you couldn't do previously and that it is okay. So the legislation is there, but there's still a big culture change piece, and I think that could be something that could be quite transformative for government if they manage to deliver on it.
Okay, we'll just have time for one final question, if it's brief, and the answer is brief.
Noted.
Yes, Ragnar Nielsen from GTS. You touched upon it, Horizon Europe here, rest of Europe, UK. You made Brexit here, what is it, years after? What is the notion? How is your ideas about collaborating with the rest of the world? Is it Europe you're looking at, or is more America? And do you look at collaboration at all, or are you trying to find UK in itself?
For science and technology, it's all about collaboration, and it always has been. As an academy and as an engineering community and a research community, they were some of the loudest folks about how science and technology research and innovation isn't a single country endeavour, it is by its very nature collaborative. There are real efforts to try and make sure that we are participating as much as we can in Horizon Europe, and also looking at collaboration opportunities across the rest of the world as well.
Thank you very much. We've unfortunately run out of time, so thank you very much, Dr. Helen Hughes.